The rain poured mercilessly over the bustling streets of New York City, mirroring the tears that streamed down Olivia Martinez's face. Her trembling hands clutched a worn-out umbrella, barely shielding her from the downpour as she made her way through the crowded sidewalks. The city's towering skyscrapers loomed overhead, a stark reminder of the wealth and power that seemed forever out of her reach. Olivia's heart ached with each step she took towards the luxurious Hawthorne mansion, where she worked as a housekeeper. At 28 years old, she had already endured more hardship than most people face in a lifetime. Orphaned at a young age and forced to fend for herself, Olivia had learned the harsh realities of life far too early. As she approached the grand iron gates of the Hawthorne estate, Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for another day of subtle jabs and condescending remarks from the family she served. The Hawthornes were old money, their wealth stretching back generations, and they never let anyone forget it, especially not the help. The moment Olivia stepped through the service entrance, she was greeted by the cold stare of Victoria Hawthorne, the family matriarch. Victoria's perfectly coiffed silver hair and impeccable designer suit exuded an air of superiority that made Olivia feel even smaller than usual. "You're late," Victoria snapped, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "And you're dripping all over my imported marble floors." "Really, Olivia, must you always be such a disappointment?" Olivia's cheeks burned with humiliation as she quickly tried to dry herself off. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hawthorne. The subway was delayed due to the storm, and I dash." "Spare me your excuses," Victoria interrupted, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "Just get to work. The conservatory needs to be spotless for this evening's charity gala. And do try not to break anything this time. We can't all afford to be as clumsy as you." With that, Victoria turned on her heel and strode away, leaving Olivia to fight back the tears that threatened to spill over. She made her way to the cleaning supplies closet, her shoulders slumped under the weight of constant criticism and judgment. As Olivia began meticulously polishing the conservatory's glass panels, her mind wandered to a time long ago, a time when she wasn't just a faceless servant, but a young girl full of dreams and potential. She thought of her parents, their faces now hazy in her memory, and the life they had promised her before tragedy struck. Lost in her reverie, Olivia didn't notice the approaching footsteps until a voice startled her back to reality. Well, if it isn't our little Cinderella," drawled Alexander Hawthorne, Victoria's eldest son and the heir to the family fortune. His handsome features were marred by the cruel smirk that played on his lips as he looked down at Olivia. "Still dreaming of a fairy godmother to come and rescue you from your pitiful existence?" Olivia's grip tightened on the cleaning cloth as she forced herself to meet Alexander's mocking gaze. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Hawthorne. Is there something you need?" Alexander chuckled, the sound devoid of any real humor. "Oh, Olivia, always so serious. You know, life might be a little easier for you if you learn to smile more. Maybe then people would actually want you around." The words cut deep, but Olivia refused to let him see how much they affected her. She had learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. Instead, she straightened her back and replied with as much dignity as she could muster, "I'll keep that in mind, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." As Alexander sauntered away, his laughter echoing through the conservatory, Olivia allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She leaned against the cool glass, her reflection staring back at her, a plain face framed by unruly dark hair, eyes that had seen too much sorrow for someone so young. For a fleeting second, she wondered what it would be like to be one of them, to have wealth, power, and the luxury of never worrying about where her next meal would come from. But as quickly as the thought came, Olivia pushed it away. She may not have much, but she had her integrity, her kindness, and a strength that the Hawthornes, for all their money, could never understand. With renewed determination, she returned to her task, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. As the day wore on, Olivia found herself constantly dodging the barbs and insults thrown her way by various members of the Hawthorne family. Emma, the youngest daughter, purposefully spilled her smoothie on the freshly mopped floor, giggling as she watched Olivia clean it up. The middle son, James, made a show of checking his wallet every time Olivia entered a room, as if implying she might steal from them. It was during one of these moments, as Olivia was arranging flowers in the grand foyer, that she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "I'm telling you, Victoria, we need to be careful," came the hushed voice of Richard Hawthorne, the family patriarch. "If anyone finds out about the true source of our wealth, everything we've built could come crashing down." Victoria's reply was sharp and dismissive. "Don't be ridiculous, Richard. We've covered our tracks perfectly. No one will ever know that our fortune was built on the backs of exploited workers and illegal dealings. The Hawthorne name is untouchable." Olivia's hands trembled as she processed what she had just heard. The family that had tormented her for years, that paraded their wealth and superiority, were nothing but frauds and criminals. Part of her wanted to rejoice in this knowledge, to use it as a weapon against their cruelty. But a larger part of her was simply horrified at the depths of their deception. Lost in her thoughts, Olivia didn't notice the vase slipping from her grasp until it was too late. The crash of shattering porcelain echoed through the foyer, followed by a deathly silence. Victoria and Richard emerged from the study, their faces contorted with rage. "You clumsy, worthless girl!" Victoria shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "That vase was a priceless family heirloom. How dare you destroy it with your incompetence?" Olivia fell to her knees, frantically trying to gather the broken pieces. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hawthorne. It was an accident. I'll pay for it, I promise." Richard's laugh was cold and cruel. "Pay for it? With what money? It would take you a lifetime to earn enough to replace that vase. No, I think it's time we taught you a lesson about the consequences of your actions." As the Hawthorns closed in around her, Olivia felt a strange calm wash over her. She looked up at them, her eyes clear and unwavering. "You're right, Mr. Hawthorne. It's time for a lesson about consequences. But I don't think I'm the one who needs to learn it." The family exchanged confused glances, taken aback by Olivia's sudden change in demeanor. It was at that moment that the doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Victoria huffed in annoyance. "Who could that be? We're not expecting any guests until the gala this evening." She turned to Olivia, her voice dripping with venom. "Make yourself useful and answer the door. We'll deal with you afterward." Olivia rose to her feet, brushing off her uniform as she made her way to the grand entrance. As she opened the heavy oak door, she found herself face to face with a distinguished-looking man in a crisp suit, flanked by two stern-faced individuals. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice carrying an air of authority. "I'm Detective John Anderson from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. We have some questions for the Hawthorne family regarding certain financial discrepancies." Olivia's heart raced as she led the agents into the foyer, where the Hawthornes stood frozen in shock. Victoria's face had drained of all color, while Richard looked as if he might faint at any moment. Detective Anderson surveyed the scene, his eyes lingering on the broken vase before settling on the family. "Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, we have reason to believe that your family's wealth has been accumulated through illegal means, including tax evasion, money laundering, and worker exploitation. We have a warrant to search the premises and seize any relevant documents." As the reality of the situation sank in, chaos erupted. Victoria began shouting accusations, blaming everyone but herself for their predicament. Richard slumped into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. Alexander, James, and Emma stood by, shell-shocked and silent for once in their lives. Amidst the commotion, Olivia felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to find an elderly woman standing beside her, her kind eyes twinkling with a mixture of sadness and pride. "You've done well, my dear," the woman said softly. "It's time for the truth to come out." Olivia's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" The woman smiled, a smile that seemed oddly familiar to Olivia. "My name is Eleanor Hawthorne. I'm Richard's mother, and the true heir to the Hawthorne fortune. And you, my brave girl, are the key to setting things right." As Eleanor's words hung in the air, Olivia felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The world she had known, defined by struggle and humiliation, was about to change forever. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test her strength, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately reveal a truth about her own identity that would leave everyone speechless. The rain outside had finally stopped, and a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow through the foyer's stained glass windows. For Olivia, it felt like a sign, a promise of hope and new beginnings amidst the storm of revelations that was about to unfold. As the FBI agents began their search of the mansion, Olivia found herself being gently led away by Eleanor. The older woman's touch was comforting, a stark contrast to the cold treatment she had endured from the rest of the Hawthorne family for so long. "There's so much you need to know, Olivia," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But first, we must get you away from here. The storm that's about to hit this family, you shouldn't be caught in the crossfire." Olivia hesitated, glancing back at the chaos unfolding in the foyer. Despite everything they had done to her, a small part of her felt a twinge of sympathy for the Hawthornes. They had been her whole world for so long, even if it was a world of cruelty and disdain. Eleanor seemed to sense her conflicted emotions. "I know it's hard, my dear. But trust me when I say that your destiny lies beyond these walls. There are secrets about your past, about who you really are, that will change everything." As they reached the grand staircase, Alexander suddenly appeared, his face a mask of fury and desperation. "You," he snarled, pointing an accusing finger at Olivia. "You did this, didn't you? You called the FBI. I always knew you were nothing but a conniving little rat." Before Olivia could respond, Eleanor stepped between them, her frail frame somehow exuding an aura of power that made Alexander take a step back. "That's enough, Alexander," she said, her voice sharp with authority. "You would do well to remember that your actions have consequences. Olivia is not to blame for the sins of this family." Alexander's eyes widened in recognition. "Grandmother? But you're supposed to be dead?" Eleanor finished for him, a wry smile on her lips. "I'm sure that's what your father told you. It made it easier for him to seize control of the family fortune, after all. But as you can see, I'm very much alive, and I'm here to right the wrongs that have been done." As Alexander stood there, speechless for once, Eleanor turned back to Olivia. "Come, my dear. We have much to discuss, and time is of the essence." With one last look at the life she was leaving behind, Olivia allowed herself to be led out of the Hawthorne mansion. As they stepped into the sunlight, she felt as if she were emerging from a long, dark tunnel. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Little did Olivia know that this was just the first step on a journey that would test her in ways she could never have anticipated. The secrets of her past, the true nature of her identity, and the challenges that lay ahead would push her to her limits, but they would also reveal a strength and resilience she never knew she possessed. As Eleanor helped her into a waiting car, Olivia caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. For a moment, she thought she saw something different in her own eyes, a spark of hope, a glimmer of the person she was always meant to be. The humble housekeeper was gone, and in her place stood a woman on the verge of discovering her true self. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the Hawthorne mansion and all the pain it represented. As they drove through the bustling streets of New York, Olivia felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in her life, she was eager to find out. Eleanor patted Olivia's hand gently, her eyes twinkling with a secret yet to be revealed. "My dear," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "you have no idea how long I've waited for this moment. There's so much you need to know about who you really are, about the legacy that rightfully belongs to you." As the car wove through traffic, taking them towards an uncertain future, Olivia couldn't help but feel that she was on the precipice of something extraordinary. The humble woman who had been mocked and belittled for so long was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery that would shake the foundations of everything she thought she knew. Little did she know that the greatest revelations and the most daunting challenges were yet to come. The truth about her identity would not only change her life but would send shockwaves through the very society that had once looked down upon her. The stage was set for a tale of redemption, justice, and the triumph of the human spirit against all odds. As New York City faded into the distance behind them, Olivia took a deep breath, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The first chapter of her new life was about to begin, and with it, a story that would captivate hearts and prove that true worth comes not from wealth or status, but from the strength of one's character and the purity of one's soul. As the sleek black car wound its way through the bustling streets of New York City, Olivia Martinez found herself in a daze, still trying to process the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. The Hawthorne mansion, which had been both her prison and her livelihood for so long, was now nothing more than a shrinking silhouette in the rearview mirror. Beside her sat Eleanor Hawthorne, the mysterious grandmother who had appeared out of nowhere, promising answers to questions Olivia didn't even know she had. "Where are we going?" Olivia finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she watched the familiar cityscape give way to lush, green suburbs. Eleanor's weathered hand gave Olivia's a gentle squeeze. "To a place where you'll be safe, my dear. A place where we can talk freely about your past, your present, and most importantly, your future." As the car turned onto a secluded road lined with ancient oak trees, Olivia couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and fear. For someone who had spent her entire life just trying to survive, the idea of having a future, one that apparently held some great significance, was almost too much to comprehend. The vehicle finally came to a stop in front of a charming Victorian mansion, its white paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was nothing like the ostentatious Hawthorne estate. This place exuded warmth and welcome. As they stepped out of the car, Olivia was struck by the peaceful silence, broken only by the gentle chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was a world away from the chaos she had left behind. "Welcome to Rose Hill," Eleanor said, a hint of pride in her voice. "This has been my home for the past 20 years, ever since I was forced into hiding by my own son." Olivia's eyes widened in shock. "Forced into hiding? But why? What happened?" Eleanor's face clouded with a mix of sadness and determination. "That, my dear, is a long and complicated story. One that is inextricably tied to your own. Come, let's go inside. There's someone else you need to meet." As they walked up the gravel path to the front door, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking towards a destiny she never knew awaited her. The door swung open before they reached it, revealing a tall, distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Ah, Eleanor," he said, his voice warm and cultured. "I see you've finally brought her home." Eleanor nodded, a look of understanding passing between them. "Olivia, I'd like you to meet Charles Worthington. He's been my confidant and protector all these years, and he's played a crucial role in bringing you here today." Charles extended his hand to Olivia, who shook it hesitantly. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Martinez. Or should I say, Miss Hawthorne?" Olivia felt as if the ground had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. "I'm sorry, what did you just call me?" Eleanor placed a comforting hand on Olivia's shoulder. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside. There's much to explain, and I'm sure you have countless questions. In a daze, Olivia allowed herself to be led into a cozy study lined with bookshelves. The room was bathed in warm sunlight streaming through large windows that overlooked meticulously maintained gardens. Under different circumstances, Olivia might have found the setting soothing, but at that moment, her mind was reeling from Charles's words. As they settled into plush armchairs, Eleanor took a deep breath, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Olivia, what I'm about to tell you will likely come as a shock. But I need you to understand that everything we've done, all the secrets we've kept, it was all to protect you. Olivia leaned forward, her heart pounding. Protect me from what? And what did Mr. Worthington mean by calling me Miss Hawthorne? Eleanor exchanged a glance with Charles before continuing. Olivia, you are not who you think you are. Your real name is Olivia Catherine Hawthorne. You are my granddaughter, the true heir to the Hawthorne fortune. The words hung in the air, each one landing like a physical blow. Olivia felt as if she couldn't breathe, her mind struggling to process this impossible revelation. But how? I don't understand. I grew up in foster care. I've worked as a maid my entire adult life. How could I possibly be? Charles leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. It was all part of an elaborate plan to keep you safe, Miss Hawthorne. A plan that began the night your parents were murdered. Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Murdered? But I was told they died in a car accident. Eleanor's eyes filled with pain. I'm so sorry, my dear. That was the story we had to tell to protect you. The truth is far more sinister. Your parents, my son Edward and his wife Maria, were killed because they discovered the truth about the illegal activities Richard was involved in. As Eleanor's words sank in, fragmented memories began to surface in Olivia's mind, flashes of a happy childhood, loving parents, and a life of privilege. But these images were quickly overshadowed by a night of terror, screams, and being whisked away in the arms of a stranger. I remember, Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. There was a man. He took me away that night. He told me I had to forget who I was, that it was the only way to stay alive. Charles nodded solemnly. That man was me. I was your father's best friend and confidant. When he uncovered Richard's crimes, he knew his life was in danger. He entrusted me with your safety, knowing that Richard would stop at nothing to eliminate any threat to his power, even if that threat was his own granddaughter. Olivia's mind was reeling, struggling to reconcile her life of hardship with this new reality. But why? Why did you let me suffer all these years? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Eleanor reached out, taking Olivia's hands in her own. Because, my darling girl, Richard's reach was far and wide. We needed to make sure you were completely off his radar. What better hiding place than right under his nose? As a humble maid, you were invisible to him, beneath his notice. It broke my heart to watch you endure their cruelty, but it was the only way to keep you alive until we could gather enough evidence to bring Richard down. As the full weight of her true identity settled upon her, Olivia felt a maelstrom of emotions, anger at the years of deception, grief for the parents she had lost, and a strange sense of vindication. All those years of being looked down upon, of being treated as less than human by the Hawthornes, suddenly took on a new significance. So, what happens now? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Charles leaned forward, his expression serious. Now, Miss Hawthorne, we prepare for the fight of our lives. Richard may be in custody, but he still has powerful allies. We need to establish your true identity, claim your rightful inheritance, and bring all those involved in your parents' murder to justice. Eleanor squeezed Olivia's hand reassuringly. But you won't be alone, my dear. We'll be with you every step of the way. It's time for you to reclaim your birthright and take your place as the woman you were always meant to be. As Olivia sat there, trying to process everything she had learned, a fire began to kindle within her. Years of suppressed anger, pain, and longing for justice suddenly had an outlet. She thought of all the people like her, the invisible workers, the downtrodden, those who had suffered under the boot of corrupt power. In that moment, she made a silent vow not just to reclaim her own identity, but to use her newfound position to make a difference in the world. I'm ready, Olivia said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Tell me everything I need to know. It's time to right the wrongs of the past. Over the next few hours, Eleanor and Charles filled Olivia in on the intricate details of her family's history and the events that led to her hidden identity. The Hawthorne fortune, it turned out, had been built on a foundation of illegal arms dealing, money laundering, and exploitation of vulnerable communities. Olivia's father, Edward, had discovered the truth and was preparing to expose everything when he and his wife were silenced. As night fell, Olivia found herself standing on the balcony of her new room at Rose Hill, gazing out at the star-filled sky. The weight of her true identity and the responsibility it carried pressed heavily upon her shoulders. She was no longer just Olivia Martinez, the humble maid. She was Olivia Catherine Hawthorne, heir to a fortune built on corruption and the key to bringing down a criminal empire. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Charles, his face etched with concern. How are you holding up, Miss Hawthorne? He asked gently. Olivia managed a small smile. Please, call me Olivia. I'm processing. It's a lot to take in. Charles nodded understandingly. Indeed it is. But there's something else you need to know. Something that might make your path even more challenging. Olivia braced herself, wondering what other revelations the night could possibly hold. What is it? Charles's expression grew grave. We've received word that Alexander Hawthorne has fled the country. He managed to transfer a significant portion of the family's assets to offshore accounts before the FBI could freeze everything. He's out there, Olivia, and he knows the truth about you now. He'll stop at nothing to eliminate the threat you pose to his freedom and wealth. A chill ran down Olivia's spine as she thought of Alexander, the cruel, arrogant man who had tormented her for years. The idea that he was now actively seeking to harm her was terrifying, but it also strengthened her resolve. What do we do? She asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Charles's eyes gleamed with determination. We prepare. Starting tomorrow, you'll begin an intensive training program. Self-defense, financial management, public speaking, everything you'll need to not only protect yourself but to step into your role as the head of the Hawthorne Empire. It won't be easy, but I believe in you, Olivia. You have your father's courage and your mother's compassion. You can do this. As Charles bid her good night and left, Olivia turned back to the starry sky. Her life had changed irrevocably in the span of a day, and the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty. But for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of purpose, a burning desire to fight not just for herself, but for all those who had suffered under the corrupt regime of her family. Little did Olivia know that her greatest challenges and her most unexpected allies were yet to come. As she prepared to step into her new role, forces were already aligning both for and against her. The humble maid was about to become the central figure in a battle that would shake the foundations of New York's elite society. The next morning dawned bright and early, marking the beginning of Olivia's transformation. As she made her way down to breakfast, she was struck by how different everything felt. The soft carpet under her feet, the expensive artwork on the walls, all reminders of a world she was born into but never knew. Eleanor was waiting for her in the sun-drenched dining room, a spread of fresh fruits, pastries, and coffee laid out on the table. "Good morning, my dear," she said warmly. "I hope you managed to get some rest. We have a busy day ahead of us." Olivia nodded, taking a seat across from her grandmother. "I'm ready. What's first on the agenda?" Before Eleanor could answer, the dining room door burst open, and a whirlwind of energy entered in the form of a petite, red-haired woman. "So, this is our girl," she exclaimed, her green eyes sparkling with excitement as she looked Olivia up and down. "Oh honey, we have got our work cut out for us, but don't you worry. By the time I'm done with you, you'll have those stuffy socialites eating out of the palm of your hand." Eleanor chuckled at Olivia's bewildered expression. "Olivia, meet Vivian St. Clair. She's going to be your guide to navigating the treacherous waters of high society. Vivian, try not to overwhelm the poor girl on her first day, will you?" Vivian waved her hand dismissively. "Darling, overwhelming is my middle name. Now, Olivia, eat up quickly. We've got a full day of etiquette lessons, wardrobe fitting, and media training ahead of us. Can't have you stumbling over your words when we announce your triumphant return to society, can we?" As Olivia tried to process this new whirlwind of information, Charles entered the room, his expression serious. "I hate to interrupt, but we have a situation. The press has gotten wind of the FBI raid on the Hawthorne mansion. They're asking questions, and rumors are starting to circulate. We need to move up our timeline." Eleanor's face grew grave. "How much time do we have?" Charles sighed. "A week, maybe 2 at most, before we need to go public with Olivia's true identity. Any longer, and we risk losing control of the narrative." Vivian clapped her hands together. "Well then, no time to waste. Olivia, darling, hope you're ready for a crash course in being a Hawthorne. We'll make a diamond out of you yet." And so began the most intense week of Olivia's life. Each day was a whirlwind of activity, pushing her to her limits both physically and mentally. Mornings were spent with Charles, poring over financial documents and learning the intricacies of the Hawthorne business empire. Olivia was shocked to discover the true extent of her family's wealth and influence, stretching far beyond New York to touch nearly every corner of the globe. Afternoons were dedicated to Vivian's tutelage. The vivacious redhead was relentless in her efforts to transform Olivia from a meek maid into a confident heiress. From proper table etiquette to the art of making small talk with influential people, no detail was too small for Vivian's exacting standards. "Remember, darling," Vivian would say, circling Olivia like a shark, "in this world, perception is everything. You must be poised, confident, and unflappable at all times. These people will be looking for any sign of weakness, any hint that you don't belong. We can't give them that satisfaction." Evenings were reserved for physical training with a former Navy SEAL named Jack. Self-defense, situational awareness, and even basic marksmanship were all part of the curriculum. "Alexander is still out there," Jack reminded her during their first session. "And he's not the only threat. You need to be prepared for anything." Through it all, Eleanor was a constant source of support and guidance. In quiet moments between lessons, she would share stories of Olivia's parents, their love story, their dreams for the future, and the principles they held dear. "Your father always said that wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege," Eleanor told her one evening as they sat in the garden, watching the sunset. "He believed that those with means had a duty to help those less fortunate. That's what made him different from Richard, and what ultimately led to his downfall." Olivia absorbed these stories like a sponge, feeling a connection to her lost parents growing stronger with each passing day. Their values, their dreams, they became a guiding light for her, a North Star to follow in the tumultuous sea of her new life. As the week progressed, Olivia found herself changing in ways she never thought possible. The timid maid who had entered Rosehill was slowly giving way to a more confident, assured young woman. She still felt out of her depth at times, overwhelmed by the enormity of the task ahead, but there was a fire burning within her now, a determination to honor her parents' memory and use her newfound position to make a real difference in the world. It wasn't just her demeanor that was changing. Under Vivian's expert guidance, Olivia's external transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Gone were the shapeless uniforms and practical shoes, replaced by elegant designer dresses and heels that made her feel like she was walking on air. Her unruly hair was tamed into sophisticated styles, and she learned the art of applying makeup that enhanced her natural beauty without hiding it. As Olivia stood before the full-length mirror on the eve of her public debut, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Gone was the timid maid who had scrubbed floors and endured countless insults. In her place stood a poised, elegant young woman who exuded confidence and grace. Well, Vivian said, circling Olivia with a critical eye. I do believe we've done it. You're ready to face the wolves, my dear. Olivia took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of her midnight blue gown. I hope so. I still feel like I'm playing dress-up sometimes. Vivian placed her hands on Olivia's shoulders, meeting her gaze in the mirror. Listen to me, Olivia Hawthorne. You are not playing anything. This is who you were always meant to be. The clothes, the makeup, they're just window dressing. The real transformation has happened in here. She tapped Olivia's chest, right above her heart. You're stronger than you know, and it's time for the world to see it. A knock on the door interrupted their moment. Charles entered, his face a mix of excitement and concern. It's time, he said simply. The press conference is set for tomorrow morning. Are you ready, Olivia? Olivia squared her shoulders, lifting her chin in a gesture of defiance against her own doubts. As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was setting the stage for Olivia's grand reveal. The press conference was to be held in the grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Plaza Hotel, a fitting venue for such a momentous occasion. As their limousine pulled up to the hotel, Olivia felt her heart racing. The street was lined with reporters and curious onlookers, all eager to catch a glimpse of the mysterious woman who had thrown New York's elite into such a tizzy. Eleanor squeezed her hand reassuringly. Remember, my dear, you are a Hawthorne. But more importantly, you are your parents' daughter. Stand tall and speak your truth. The rest will follow. With a deep breath, Olivia stepped out of the car and into a sea of flashing cameras and shouted questions. She walked with her head held high, flanked by Eleanor and Charles, as they made their way into the hotel. The ballroom was packed to capacity, a sea of expectant faces all turned towards the podium where Olivia would soon stand. As she took her place behind the microphone, a hush fell over the crowd. For a moment, Olivia felt a wave of panic threatening to overwhelm her. But then she caught sight of Vivian in the front row, giving her an encouraging nod, and she felt her resolve strengthen. Good morning, Olivia began, her voice clear and steady. My name is Olivia Catherine Hawthorne, and I am here today to reclaim my birthright and to set the record straight about the Hawthorne family legacy. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by an explosion of camera flashes and excited murmurs. Olivia pressed on, her voice gaining strength with each word. For years, I lived and worked in the Hawthorne household, enduring cruel treatment and humiliation at the hands of those who should have been my family. I was led to believe that I was nothing more than a lowly maid, unworthy of respect or kindness. But the truth, as I have recently discovered, is far different. Olivia went on to recount the story of her parents' murder, the conspiracy to hide her true identity, and the years of deception that followed. She spoke of Richard Hawthorne's crimes, of the exploitation and suffering caused by the family's illegal activities. But I stand before you today not just to expose the sins of the past, but to chart a new course for the future, Olivia declared, her eyes shining with determination. The Hawthorne fortune was built on the backs of the vulnerable and the exploited. It is my intention to use every penny of my inheritance to right those wrongs, to lift up those who have been pushed down, and to create a legacy of compassion and justice that would make my parents proud. As Olivia finished her speech, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed incessantly, and the air buzzed with the electricity of a scandal unfolding in real time. Through it all, Olivia stood tall, answering questions with a poise and eloquence that belied her years of hardship. She was no longer the invisible maid, she was Olivia Hawthorne, and she was here to shake the very foundations of New York society. As the press conference drew to a close, Olivia felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had done it. She had faced her fears, told her truth, and taken the first step towards reclaiming her life. But little did she know that her challenges were far from over. As she left the ballroom, surrounded by her newfound family and supporters, a pair of cold eyes watched her from the shadows. Alexander Hawthorne, his face twisted with rage and jealousy, slipped out of the hotel unnoticed. His mind was already racing with plans for revenge, determined to destroy the woman who threatened everything he had schemed and killed for. In the days that followed, Olivia's story became the talk of the town. Newspapers and gossip columns were filled with speculation about the Cinderella heiress who had risen from rags to riches. Some hailed her as a hero, a champion for the downtrodden who was using her newfound wealth and influence for good. Others, particularly those with ties to the old Hawthorne regime, painted her as an opportunist, a fraud who was capitalizing on a family tragedy. Through it all, Olivia tried to stay focused on her mission. With Charles's guidance, she began the process of untangling the complex web of Hawthorne business dealings, separating the legitimate enterprises from those built on exploitation and crime. It was a daunting task, made even more challenging by the resistance she faced from longtime Hawthorne associates who were reluctant to see their gravy train come to an end. One particularly tense meeting with the board of directors of Hawthorne Industries left Olivia feeling drained and discouraged. As she slumped in her chair in Eleanor's study, she couldn't help but wonder if she was in over her head. "I don't know if I can do this, Grandma," she confessed, using the term of endearment that still felt new on her tongue. "These people have been running these companies for decades. They look at me like I'm a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes." Eleanor's eyes softened with understanding. "My dear, do you know why those men look at you that way? It's because they're afraid. They're afraid of the change you represent, of the accountability you're bringing to a system that has allowed them to profit from others' misery for far too long." She leaned forward, taking Olivia's hands in her own. "You may not have their years of experience, but you have something far more valuable, a moral compass and the courage to follow it. Don't let them intimidate you. Remember who you are and why you're doing this." Olivia nodded, feeling her resolve strengthen once more. "You're right. I can't back down now. There's too much at stake." As she threw herself back into her work with renewed determination, Olivia found unexpected allies in her quest for change. James Hawthorne, the middle son who had once delighted in tormenting her, reached out with an olive branch. "I was wrong about you," he admitted during a tense but ultimately productive lunch meeting. "I let my father's prejudices cloud my judgment. But seeing the way you've handled yourself, the changes you're trying to make, I want to help, if you'll let me." Olivia studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. But all she saw was sincerity and a hint of shame in his eyes. "It won't be easy," she warned him. "There are a lot of people who aren't happy with the changes I'm proposing. You might face backlash from your old friends." James squared his shoulders. "Let them talk. It's time I started doing the right thing for once in my life. With James on board, Olivia found herself with a valuable insider's perspective on the workings of Hawthorne Industries. His knowledge, combined with Charles's financial expertise and Eleanor's guidance, began to turn the tide in their favor. But as Olivia's influence grew and her reforms began to take hold, the threats against her escalated. Anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, threatening letters left on her car, even a close call with a car that seemed to deliberately try to run her off the road. It was clear that someone was determined to stop her at any cost. "It has to be Alexander," Olivia insisted during an emergency meeting with her inner circle. "He's the only one with enough to lose to go to these lengths." Charles nodded grimly. "I agree. Our sources indicate that he's been moving money around, hiring some unsavory characters. We need to be extra vigilant." Despite the increasing danger, Olivia refused to back down. She threw herself into her work with even greater fervor, determined to see her vision for a reformed Hawthorne empire come to fruition. It was during this tumultuous time that an unexpected figure from Olivia's past re-entered her life. Michael Reeves, a young man who had worked as a gardener at the Hawthorne estate, reached out through Eleanor. "He says he has information that might be crucial to your safety," Eleanor explained, handing Olivia a sealed envelope. "And he asked about you." Seemed quite concerned. Olivia felt a flutter in her chest as she remembered Michael, the kind-hearted gardener who had always had a smile for her, even on her worst days. He had been one of the few bright spots in her life at the Hawthorne mansion, though she had never dared to hope for anything more than fleeting moments of friendship. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and began to read. Michael's letter was filled with warnings about Alexander's movements, details of conversations he had overheard while tending to the estate grounds. But it was the last paragraph that made Olivia's heart race. "I know you're facing incredible dangers, Olivia. I want you to know that I believe in you, and in the changes you're trying to make. If there's anything I can do to help, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. I've always admired your strength and kindness, even when the world was cruel to you. Stay safe." Olivia read the letter several times, a warmth spreading through her chest. In the whirlwind of her new life, she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone care for her simply as Olivia, not as the Hawthorne heiress or the face of a revolution. "I think we should meet with him," Olivia said finally, looking up at Eleanor. "His information could be valuable, and, well, it would be nice to see a friendly face from the old days." Eleanor's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Of course, my dear. I'll arrange it." The meeting was set for the following evening at a quiet cafe in a nondescript part of town. As Olivia entered, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and nerves, she spotted Michael immediately. He stood as she approached, his face breaking into the warm smile she remembered so well. "Olivia," he said softly, taking her hand. "It's so good to see you." As they sat down, Olivia felt a sense of ease wash over her. With Michael, there was no need for the carefully constructed persona she had to maintain in public. She could just be herself, the girl who had dreamed of a better life while planting flowers in the Hawthorne gardens. Their conversation flowed easily, moving from the serious matter of Alexander's threats to reminiscing about shared moments from their time at the estate. Michael's eyes never left Olivia's face, drinking in every word and expression as if he couldn't quite believe she was really there. "I always knew you were meant for greater things," he said at one point, his voice filled with admiration. "Even when they treated you so horribly, there was a light in you that they couldn't dim. I'm just glad the world finally gets to see what I've always seen." Olivia felt her cheeks warm at his words. For the first time since her life had been turned upside down, she allowed herself to feel something beyond the constant stress and pressure of her new role. With Michael, she remembered what it was like to be simply Olivia, not an heiress, not a symbol, just a woman enjoying the company of a man who saw her for who she truly was. As their meeting drew to a close, neither seemed eager to part ways. "I'd like to help," Michael said earnestly. "In any way I can. I know I'm not a businessman or a lawyer, but I want to support what you're doing. It's important work, Olivia." Olivia smiled, touched by his sincerity. "Thank you, Michael. That means more to me than you know. And I think I'd like to see you again. If you're interested, that is." The smile that lit up Michael's face was answer enough. As they said their goodbyes, Olivia felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. Amidst all the chaos and danger of her new life, she had found an unexpected source of joy and support. But as Olivia left the cafe, her mind buzzing with thoughts of Michael and the future, she failed to notice the sleek black car parked across the street. Inside, Alexander Hawthorne watched through tinted windows, his face a mask of cold fury. "So," he murmured to himself, "the little maid thinks she can have it all, does she? We'll see about that." With a nod to his driver, the car pulled away from the curb, following Olivia at a discreet distance. Alexander's mind was already racing with plans, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had found Olivia's weakness, and he intended to exploit it to the fullest. As Olivia returned to Rose Hill that evening, her heart light despite the weight of her responsibilities, she had no idea of the storm that was brewing. The battle for the Hawthorne legacy was about to take a dark and dangerous turn, and Olivia would need every ounce of her newfound strength to face what was coming. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Olivia. By day, she threw herself into the monumental task of reforming the Hawthorne empire. Board meetings, charity galas, and press conferences filled her calendar, each event an opportunity to further her vision of a more ethical and compassionate business model. But it was her evenings with Michael that became her sanctuary. They would meet in quiet corners of the city, away from the prying eyes of the paparazzi and the expectations of high society. Sometimes they would simply walk in the park, talking about their hopes and dreams. Other times, they would find a cozy restaurant where Olivia could indulge in the simple pleasures she had been denied for so long. "I never thought I'd be so excited about a cheeseburger," Olivia laughed one evening, as they sat in a small diner far from the glittering world of Manhattan's elite. Michael grinned, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Well, I never thought I'd be on a date with the most talked about woman in New York. I guess we're both full of surprises." As their relationship deepened, Olivia found herself opening up to Michael in ways she never had before. She shared her fears about the enormous responsibility she now carried, her doubts about whether she was truly up to the task of reforming a system that had been corrupt for generations. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, terrified that I'm going to fail," she confessed one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson River. "That I'll let down all the people who are counting on me to make things right." Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Olivia, listen to me. The fact that you're even trying to make a difference, that you're willing to take on this enormous challenge, that already makes you a success in my book. You're the bravest, most compassionate person I know. If anyone can do this, it's you." His unwavering faith in her became a source of strength for Olivia, a beacon of hope in the stormy seas of her new life. With Michael by her side, she felt invincible, ready to take on any challenge that came her way. But even as Olivia's personal life blossomed, the threats against her continued to escalate. Security reports from Jack, her former Navy SEAL trainer, grew increasingly alarming. There had been several attempted breaches at Rose Hill, and suspicious figures had been spotted following Olivia on her outings with Michael. "We need to be more careful," Charles warned during an emergency meeting. "Alexander is getting desperate. He knows that with each passing day, his chances of regaining control of the Hawthorne empire are slipping away." Olivia nodded, her face set with determination. "I won't let him intimidate me. We've come too far to back down now." But even as she spoke the words, a chill ran down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that Alexander was planning something big, something that would shake the very foundations of the world she was trying to build. Her fears were realized one fateful evening, as she and Michael were leaving a small bistro after a quiet dinner. They had barely stepped onto the sidewalk when a van screeched to a halt beside them. Before either of them could react, masked men leapt out, grabbing Olivia and Michael and forcing them into the vehicle. As the van sped away, Olivia's mind raced with terror and confusion. She could feel Michael's hand gripping hers tightly in the darkness, his presence a small comfort in the chaos. After what felt like hours, the van finally came to a stop. Olivia and Michael were roughly pulled from the vehicle and led into what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. "Welcome home, dear cousin," Alexander sneered, his face twisted with malice. "So kind of you to join us." Olivia straightened her spine, meeting Alexander's gaze with defiance. "What do you want, Alexander? You know you can't get away with this." Alexander's laugh was cold and humorless. "Oh, but I already have. You see, Olivia, you may have won over the public with your rags to riches story, but you've forgotten one crucial detail. I know where all the bodies are buried." Literally. He began to pace, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "Did you really think I would just stand by and watch you dismantle everything our family has built? Everything I've worked for? You mean everything you've stolen and exploited?" Olivia shot back. "The Hawthorne legacy is built on suffering and corruption. It needs to end." Alexander's face contorted with rage. "You naive little fool. Do you have any idea how the real world works? Power isn't given, it's taken. And I intend to take back what's rightfully mine." He snapped his fingers, and one of his henchmen brought forward a laptop. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over control of all Hawthorne assets to me. You're going to make a public statement announcing your resignation as head of the company, citing mental health issues or whatever sob story you prefer. And then, you're going to disappear. Forever." Olivia felt her blood run cold. "And if I refuse?" Alexander's smile was chilling. "Well, then I'm afraid your little boyfriend here might meet with an unfortunate accident. And wouldn't it be a shame if something were to happen to dear old Grandma Eleanor? Or perhaps Charles. I hear he's become quite the father figure to you." Olivia's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. She couldn't give in to Alexander's demands, but she couldn't bear the thought of her loved ones being hurt because of her. It was then that Michael spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "You won't get away with this, Alexander. People will ask questions. They'll know something's not right." Alexander turned his cold gaze to Michael. "Ah yes, the gallant gardener. How touching that you think your opinion matters here. But don't worry, I have plans for you too. After all, we can't have any loose ends, can we?" As Alexander continued to gloat about his plans, Olivia's mind was working overtime. She remembered her training with Jack, the countless hours spent preparing for just such a scenario. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to work at the ropes binding her wrists, all while keeping her eyes fixed on Alexander. "You're right about one thing, Alexander," Olivia said, her voice calm despite the storm raging inside her. "Power isn't given, it's taken. But you've forgotten something crucial." Alexander raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh. And what's that?" In one swift motion, Olivia broke free from her bonds and lunged forward, catching Alexander off guard. "I'm not the same helpless girl you used to torment." Chaos erupted in the warehouse. Olivia's sudden attack had created just enough distraction for Michael to break free as well. Together, they fought against Alexander's henchmen, months of rigorous training paying off in those crucial moments. As they battled, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Alexander's face paled as he realized his carefully laid plans were unraveling before his eyes. "How?" he sputtered, looking wildly around as police officers began pouring into the warehouse. Olivia smiled grimly, holding up her wrist to reveal a delicate bracelet. A gift from Jack. GPS tracker and emergency beacon. Did you really think I'd go anywhere without protection after all your threats? Alexander's face contorted with rage as he lunged at Olivia, but he was quickly tackled by two officers. As he was being handcuffed, he spat out, "This isn't over, Olivia. You'll never be rid of me." Olivia watched as Alexander was led away, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Relief, exhaustion, and a strange sense of pity for the man who had caused so much pain. As the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, Olivia turned to Michael, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right? I'm so sorry you got caught up in all this." Michael pulled her into a tight embrace, his voice shaky but filled with warmth. "I'm fine. We're both fine. And Olivia, you were amazing." In the days that followed, the attempted kidnapping became front-page news across the country. Alexander's arrest and the subsequent investigation unearthed even more evidence of the Hawthorne family's illegal activities, solidifying Olivia's position as the rightful heir and vindicating her efforts to reform the company. As Olivia sat in Eleanor's study, surrounded by her grandmother, Charles, and Michael, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. "So, what now?" Charles asked, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Olivia took a deep breath, her eyes shining with determination. "Now, we finish what we started. We make the Hawthorne name stand for something good, something that helps people instead of exploiting them." Eleanor reached out and squeezed Olivia's hand. "Your parents would be so proud of you, my dear. You've faced challenges that would have broken a lesser person, and you've come out stronger for it." Michael nodded in agreement. "You've shown everyone that it's not where you come from that matters, but who you choose to be." As Olivia looked around at the faces of her loved ones, she felt a surge of gratitude. From a humble maid to the head of a corporate empire, her journey had been fraught with danger and heartache. But it had also brought her a family she never knew she had, a love she never thought she'd find, and a purpose that filled her with passion. In the months that followed, Olivia threw herself into transforming Hawthorne Industries. Under her leadership, the company became a pioneer in ethical business practices, focusing on sustainable development and community outreach programs. The Hawthorne Foundation, once a mere tax write-off for the family's excesses, was revitalized as a major force for good. Olivia used a significant portion of her inheritance to fund education initiatives for underprivileged youth, healthcare programs for low-income communities, and environmental conservation efforts. Her story became an inspiration to millions, a real-life fairy tale of a humble woman rising above adversity to make a difference in the world. But unlike the fairy tales of old, Olivia's happily ever after wasn't about marrying a prince or living in a castle. It was about using her power and influence to lift others up, to give voice to the voiceless, and to prove that true nobility comes from one's actions, not one's birth. As for her personal life, Olivia and Michael's relationship continued to flourish. Away from the spotlight and the pressures of the business world, they found joy in simple moments, quiet walks in the park, cooking dinner together, planning for a future filled with love and purpose. One evening, as they strolled hand in hand through the gardens of Rose Hill, Michael suddenly dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Olivia Catherine Hawthorne," he began, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "from the moment I met you, when you were just a maid and I was just a gardener, I knew there was something special about you. Your kindness, your strength, your unwavering belief in doing what's right, you've inspired me every day to be a better man. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as Michael continued, "I love you not for your name or your wealth, but for the beautiful soul that shines through everything you do. Will you marry me?" Without hesitation, Olivia pulled Michael to his feet and into a passionate embrace. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. Their engagement announcement was met with an outpouring of joy and support from the public. The media dubbed them the People's Couple, a testament to their humble beginnings and their commitment to using their platform for the greater good. The wedding itself was a blend of elegance and simplicity, reflecting the couple's values. Instead of lavish gifts, guests were encouraged to donate to various charities close to Olivia and Michael's hearts. The ceremony, held in the gardens of Rose Hill, was a celebration not just of their love, but of the journey that had brought them together. As Olivia stood at the altar, looking into Michael's eyes, she felt a sense of completion. The scared, lonely girl who had once scrubbed floors and endured countless insults was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced her demons, reclaimed her identity, and found a love that transcended class and circumstance. Eleanor, who gave Olivia away, couldn't hold back her tears of joy. "Your parents are smiling down on you today, my dear," she whispered as she kissed Olivia's cheek. "You've become everything they ever hoped for and more." As the years passed, Olivia and Michael's commitment to making a difference only grew stronger. They worked side by side, balancing their business responsibilities with their philanthropic efforts. The Hawthorne name, once associated with greed and corruption, became synonymous with integrity and compassion. Olivia never forgot her roots, always making time to mentor young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. She established scholarship programs, internship opportunities, and leadership workshops, determined to give others the chances she had been denied for so long. When their first child was born, a daughter they named Hope, Olivia and Michael made a pact to raise her with the values that had guided their own journey: kindness, perseverance, and a strong sense of social responsibility. As Hope grew, Olivia would often tell her the story of her own transformation from a mocked and belittled maid to a powerful force for change. But she always emphasized that the true measure of a person wasn't in their wealth or status, but in how they treated others and the positive impact they made on the world. One day, as they walked through a newly opened community center funded by the Hawthorne Foundation, Hope tugged on Olivia's hand. "Mommy," she said, her young face serious, "when I grow up, I want to help people just like you do." Olivia knelt down, looking into her daughter's eyes that held the same fire and determination she had discovered in herself all those years ago. "You will, my love," she said softly. "And you'll do even greater things than I ever dreamed possible." As they continued their tour, greeting community members and listening to their stories, Olivia felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Her journey had been filled with hardship and danger, but it had led her to this moment, surrounded by love, purpose, and the knowledge that she was making a real difference in the world. The humble woman who had once been mocked by the wealthy family had not only reclaimed her birthright but had redefined it. The Hawthorne legacy was no longer one of greed and exploitation, but of compassion, justice, and hope for a better future. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city, Olivia stood with her family, Michael, Hope, Eleanor, and all those who had stood by her through her incredible journey. She looked out at the community they had helped build, at the lives they had touched, and she knew that this moment of love, purpose, and connection was the true happy ending she had always dreamed of. In that moment, Olivia realized that her story was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. For every life she touched, every person she inspired, was writing their own chapter in a larger narrative of hope and transformation. And so, as the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, Olivia Catherine Hawthorne, once a mocked and belittled maid, now a beacon of change and inspiration, embraced her family and looked to the future with hope, determination, and an unwavering commitment to making the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time.